So, welcome back to HR Tech Fest. I'm really excited to be talking with Nestle really about everything that you're doing at the moment in learning.
Thank you, Bill.
And moving away from learning happy sheets that we're all familiar with and doing the Happy Sheet Plus. So, from your talk this morning, which I got some rave reviews on, what were the key takeaways? What are the things you'd tell me as your kind of 1 minute summary of saying this is what you need to?
I think the key takeaways are don't overthink it. When it comes to learning, really get back to what's the point? Why do we do learning in a business? And it's for people to do things differently, not just to know things. So we need to get in touch with what they're actually doing with the learning that they're getting, starting with do they use it at all? If they don't use it, there can be no value. So really having a results focus so that we can answer the challenge of the business, what value do you deliver, by going back to the results that we give. But involving the business in that conversation. So not just serving it up, but saying, well, what results are you looking for, making them part of how they get the results, and then having that seat at the table, as they say.
Okay, so moving that from the other perspective,
Yep.
I get the business point of view, like we want this. How do you deliver for the learner?
Well, the learner is part of the business. So when we define business, we're talking about individuals, we're talking about teams, we're talking about the organisation. So we take a very learner-centric view. So it's how is this learning going to help me in my business context in terms of progressing my career, so quite individual focused, but also in achieving the goals and objectives that I have in my role in the business.
What are you seeing as the difference in the ways learning is delivered, say, now to the way it might have been done 5 or 10 years ago?
I think it's still a slow, sloth-like moving change, but in terms of modality, of course, we're seeing much more digital, we're seeing more learner-generated content, and so the role of L&D is shifting from serving it up to being more of a business partner and doing people co-piloting.
Mobilising, really, rather than
mobilising, exactly, but providing the structure and the framework of how do I make sure I'm going to the right learning or engaging in the right learning? How do I make sure I'm using it to give the results that are meaningful to me in my business context, rather than focusing just on creating content. We're also creating context and helping with the how.
Yes, and what do you think is the big thing about content and context then?
I think that you can have the best content in the world, but if it's not getting to the right people at the right time, and if it's not getting used, it all means nothing. It just all becomes waste. So I think that first you've got to have the right context to make sure that people understand why they're coming, making it clear how it aligns to what it is they need to achieve and what their goals are.
So how important is analytics in what you're doing?
Analytics makes us move from gut feel to actually data-driven insights. It proves, but it also helps inform decisions and actions about what to do. So it's not just about bums on seats and efficiencies and costs, it's moving the conversation along from how much did we spend to did we spend it well.
And taking you back to that, how often are you finding gut feel, what we thought, and what the numbers are telling us in the analytics to be different stories?
That's an interesting question, and it depends. On some things it bears true, but the difference is now we can engage the business and say, here it is, and hold a mirror up to the business. Here's the proof. And part of it is that if you look at a summary, it doesn't tell the whole story. So if you look at a summary in terms of how aligned learning is, it might all look good. But once we get into analytics and we have detail about which parts are perhaps less relevant, we can be smarter in targeting our responses. So rather than get rid of a whole course because it rated badly, we can see which elements didn't resonate or which elements are no longer aligned and make smart, targeted changes and tweaks, and therefore constantly move
relevance.
And stay at the pace of business as well. Like we have the challenge of how do we move at the speed of business? How do we get insights about the trends? So we can now start to see trends. We don't just look at isolated data points. We can see as the shapes shift over time and respond in a much more smart and targeted
And what
way.
difference, final question, what difference have you seen from the business when you've been turning up with numbers?
Insight breeds appetite is one of my catchphrases, is people don't know what they don't know. And at first they may not be interested, but what I found that we started off by answering 4 simple questions. Did they choose it? Did they like it? Did they apply it? And did it add value? And we didn't know before what happened. It was all a bit of a black box. So now I'm getting asked, well, why aren't they applying it? And sometimes the answer is because they didn't get the opportunity, and now we're putting that ownership and onus back into the business to make sure that line managers are creating the right spaces for people to apply learning. So it's changing our conversation around learning and making it more of a partnership.
That's been fantastic, really educational. Thank you.
No worries.